Tell you that. Sammy Davis has a gorgeous home. I went out and visited him. The landscaping, the shrubbery and the trees. See, I come from...
Joey Bishop's final interview confirmed the sad truth Hollywood tried to ignore. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel for more untold Hollywood stories, and don't forget to like and share this video. The legendary entertainer Joey Bishop spent decades making audiences laugh, standing beside some of the most powerful names in Hollywood, and helping shape an era that many people still call the golden age of entertainment. But in the final years of his life, the smiles became quieter, the spotlight became dimmer, and his words began revealing a side of Hollywood most fans never truly saw. To understand why Joey Bishop's final interview affected so many people, you first have to understand who he really was. Many younger viewers may recognize his name only when hearing about the famous Rat Pack, the iconic group of entertainers that included giants like Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., and Peter Lawford. But Joey Bishop was never just the other guy in the group. He was the sharp mind behind many of the jokes, the fast-talking comedian whose timing could silence a room before exploding it with laughter seconds later. While Sinatra carried charisma and Dean Martin carried effortless cool, Joey Bishop carried intelligence. He understood audiences. He understood rhythm. And perhaps most importantly, he understood people. Born in the early 1900s, Joey Bishop entered entertainment at a time when success in show business was brutal to achieve. There were no viral videos, no social media promotions, no shortcuts. Performers had to earn every clap, every laugh, and every second of attention from live audiences who could turn against you instantly. Joey worked tirelessly through nightclubs, comedy circuits, and stage performances, slowly building a reputation as someone who could think faster than almost anyone else in the room. His comedy wasn't based on gimmicks. It was built on observation, timing, and subtle delivery. He didn't need to scream to be funny. Sometimes one calm sentence from Joey Bishop could get a bigger laugh than another comedian's entire performance. As years passed, Hollywood began noticing him. Television producers realized he had a presence audiences trusted. He wasn't flashy in the traditional celebrity sense, but there was something magnetic about him. People felt comfortable listening to Joey Bishop. That calm confidence eventually led him into bigger television opportunities, guest appearances, and eventually his own talk show. But even while his career grew, Joey often found himself standing beside even larger personalities. That became the story of much of his life. The Rat Pack changed everything. During the 1950s and 1960s, the group became more than entertainers. They became cultural icons. They represented glamour, nightlife, masculinity, fame, and a kind of effortless confidence America was fascinated by. Las Vegas became their kingdom. Audiences packed casinos just to see them joke around on stage together. Many nights felt less like scripted performances and more like watching a group of powerful friends entertain themselves while the world watched in admiration. But behind the scenes, things were more complicated than they appeared. And Joey Bishop's final interviews quietly hinted at those hidden realities. Unlike Sinatra, who often dominated attention wherever he went, Joey Bishop usually stood slightly outside the brightest part of the spotlight. He was respected deeply within the group, but public attention rarely focused on him the same way it focused on Sinatra or Dean Martin. Over time, many fans began suspecting that Joey Bishop had spent years being underestimated despite being one of the smartest entertainers in the room. And in his later interviews, there were moments where that feeling became impossible to ignore. As Joey aged, he spoke more openly about the loneliness that can come after fame fades away. Hollywood has always celebrated people while they are useful, successful, and profitable. But once the cameras move on, many stars discover how quickly admiration disappears. Joey Bishop seemed painfully aware of that reality. In interviews near the end of his life, he carried the tone of a man who had seen the entertainment industry for exactly what it was, temporary. One of the saddest parts of his story is how much loss surrounded his later years. Many of the friends who defined his greatest memories were gone. Frank Sinatra passed away. Dean Martin was gone. Sammy Davis Jr. was gone. The legendary nights, the packed casinos, the roaring laughter, the endless attention from fans, all of it slowly became memories instead of reality. Imagine spending years surrounded by some of the most famous people on earth, only to eventually sit in silence reflecting on a world that no longer exists. That emotional weight seemed to follow Joey Bishop during the final chapter of his life. And this is where many viewers say his final interview confirmed what people had suspected for years: fame does not protect people from loneliness. There was a sadness underneath his calm words. Not dramatic sadness. Not emotional breakdowns. Something quieter. The kind of sadness that comes from watching time erase entire eras of your life. Joey Bishop sounded like a man who understood that history moves forward no matter how legendary you once were. New stars arrive. New audiences appear. And eventually, even icons become old stories to younger generations. What made Joey Bishop different from many celebrities was that he rarely tried to pretend otherwise. He didn't force fake positivity. He didn't act as if Hollywood was some magical paradise. Instead, he seemed reflective, honest, almost philosophical about aging and fame. That honesty resonated deeply with older audiences who had lived long enough to understand exactly what he meant. In many ways, Joey Bishop's life symbolized an uncomfortable truth about entertainment itself. The public often remembers the loudest stars while forgetting the people who quietly helped build entire careers behind the scenes. Insiders knew Joey was brilliant. Many comedians respected him immensely. But mainstream recognition often drifted elsewhere. And perhaps that is why modern audiences feel emotional watching his later interviews today. They see a talented man who gave decades of his life to entertainment yet still seemed overlooked by history compared to some of his peers. There were also whispers for years that Joey Bishop sometimes felt disconnected even within the Rat Pack dynamic. Not hated, not rejected, but overshadowed. When you stand beside personalities as massive as Sinatra and Dean Martin, public attention naturally shifts toward the biggest spotlight. Joey's role often became the witty observer rather than the central icon. Yet ironically, many insiders believed he was one of the sharpest minds among them all. Aging changes everyone. It changes celebrities, comedians, actors, musicians, and ordinary people alike. Watching Joey Bishop speak in those final years felt less like watching a Hollywood legend and more like watching a human being confront time itself. His reflections carried exhaustion, wisdom, and acceptance all at once. There's one detail many documentaries focus on repeatedly: Joey Bishop rarely seemed bitter. That's important. He could have attacked Hollywood. He could have complained endlessly about being forgotten. But instead, he often sounded like someone who simply understood life better than most people. He knew fame was temporary. He knew applause fades. He knew public attention eventually moves on. And perhaps that understanding is exactly what gave his final interviews such emotional power. For viewers discovering Joey Bishop today, there's something haunting about seeing someone who once stood at the center of entertainment history speak so quietly about the end of life. It reminds audiences how fragile fame really is. One generation sees you as unforgettable. The next generation barely recognizes your name. That transition can be painful for many celebrities, especially those who spent decades under constant public attention. Hollywood itself also changed dramatically over Joey Bishop's lifetime. The glamorous casino era faded. Television transformed. Celebrity culture evolved into something faster, louder, and far more aggressive. The world Joey knew slowly disappeared piece by piece. And by the time of his final interviews, Joey often sounded like one of the last surviving voices from an era that no longer existed. That is why people continue searching for his interviews even years later. They are not simply watching an old comedian speak. They are watching a witness to history. A man who stood beside legends. A man who experienced Hollywood before modern celebrity culture consumed everything. A man who understood the cost of fame perhaps better than audiences ever realized. And maybe that's the real reason his final interview touched people so deeply. It wasn't because he exposed shocking secrets. It wasn't because he created controversy. It was because viewers could hear something real in his voice. Reflection, regret, wisdom, loneliness, gratitude, all existing together at the same time. Joey Bishop spent most of his life making other people laugh. But in the end, his quiet honesty may have become more powerful than any joke he ever told. By the time Joey Bishop reached the final years of his life, the world around him had changed beyond recognition. The smoky lounges of Las Vegas were no longer the center of American entertainment. The elegant tuxedos, the live orchestras, the spontaneous comedy routines between friends on stage, all of it had become memories from another time. And perhaps what made Joey's later interviews so emotional was the realization that he knew he was one of the last remaining connections to that vanished world. There is something deeply haunting about watching someone outlive an entire era. Most people lose friends over time, but Joey Bishop lost an entire generation of entertainers who once dominated popular culture together. These weren't just co-workers. These were men he spent countless nights beside under bright casino lights while audiences laughed for hours. Together, the Rat Pack represented confidence, rebellion, humor, and glamour during a period when America itself was changing rapidly. Yet decades later, Joey found himself sitting quietly in interviews, reflecting on names and memories that younger audiences barely recognized anymore. Many viewers noticed that whenever Joey spoke about Frank Sinatra, there was both admiration and emotional distance in his voice. Sinatra was larger than life. He could make a room freeze simply by walking into it. People feared him, respected him, and followed him. But being close to someone with that level of influence was complicated. Joey Bishop understood Sinatra better than most because he spent years watching him privately, not just publicly. And over time, Joey seemed to realize something important. Even the most powerful stars in the world are deeply human underneath the fame. The public often saw Sinatra as untouchable, but Joey saw the pressure, the ego, the loneliness, and the emotional complexity behind the image. In subtle ways, his later interviews suggested that fame creates isolation. The bigger a celebrity becomes, the harder it becomes for them to trust people around them. Everyone wants something. Everyone wants access. Everyone wants attention from the star. And eventually, real friendships become difficult to separate from business relationships. Joey's reflections hinted that the glamorous Rat Pack lifestyle carried far more emotional weight than audiences realized at the time. What's especially tragic is that Joey Bishop himself often seemed forgotten when discussions about classic Hollywood legends appeared. Modern documentaries focused heavily on Sinatra or Dean Martin, while Joey's contributions quietly faded into the background. Yet comedians and television insiders understood his importance. Many believed he was one of the sharpest conversational performers of his generation. He could control a room without appearing to try. That kind of skill cannot easily be taught. In some interviews, Joey almost sounded disappointed by how history remembers people. Not angry, disappointed. He understood that audiences tend to simplify the past. They remember the loudest personalities and reduce everyone else into supporting characters. But life is never that simple. Without Joey Bishop's wit and intelligence, the chemistry of the Rat Pack would not have been the same. He balanced the personalities around him. He often acted as the calm center in rooms filled with giant egos and non-stop attention. As the years passed, his health naturally declined, and with aging came deeper reflection. Many celebrities avoid discussing mortality because it damages the illusion of eternal fame. But Joey Bishop did not seem interested in maintaining illusions anymore. There was a sense that he had reached a point where honesty mattered more than image. That's one reason audiences connected so strongly with his final interviews. He spoke like someone who no longer needed Hollywood's approval. There's also another layer to Joey Bishop's story that many viewers find heartbreaking. Despite decades of success, entertainment careers can still end quietly. No massive farewell. No non-stop media coverage. No grand final standing ovation. One day the world simply moves on to newer faces and newer stories. Joey seemed painfully aware of this reality. And instead of pretending otherwise, he faced it with calm acceptance. That acceptance may actually be the most emotional part of his story. Imagine spending your life surrounded by cameras, audiences, applause, celebrities, and non-stop excitement, only to eventually sit alone reflecting on how quickly time erased it all. For ordinary people, aging can already feel lonely. But for celebrities, the contrast becomes even more dramatic because they experience such extreme levels of attention during their peak years. The silence afterward can feel overwhelming. Some fans believe Joey Bishop's final interviews revealed a man who felt underappreciated by Hollywood itself. Not because he lacked talent, but because his style was subtle. He wasn't scandalous. He wasn't constantly demanding attention. He wasn't trying to dominate headlines. In modern celebrity culture, quieter personalities often disappear behind louder ones. Joey's brilliance existed in timing, observation, and intelligence, qualities that sometimes receive less recognition than flashy charisma. And perhaps this is exactly why audiences today are rediscovering him. Modern viewers are exhausted by fake celebrity personas, endless scandals, and manufactured drama. When they watch Joey Bishop speak honestly about life, aging, fame, and loss, it feels authentic. There's no performance left. Just truth. One of the most emotional aspects of his later interviews was the way he discussed memories. Older people often carry entire worlds inside their minds that no longer physically exist. Joey remembered the old Vegas, the packed theaters, the backstage jokes, the friendships, the private conversations audiences never heard. Every memory connected him to people and places now gone forever. And you could almost feel that emotional weight every time he paused before answering certain questions. There were moments where his silence said more than his words. That's something many viewers noticed immediately. Sometimes Joey would stop briefly, almost as if drifting back into another decade before continuing the interview. Those pauses carried emotion because they felt real. They felt like someone revisiting pieces of life that time had buried. And maybe the saddest truth hidden within Joey Bishop's final interviews is this: eventually, every era disappears. Every generation believes their icons will live forever in public memory, but history keeps moving. New celebrities replace old ones. New audiences grow up with entirely different cultural references. Legends slowly become trivia questions. Joey seemed to understand this reality better than most people. But despite that sadness, there was also dignity in the way he carried himself. He didn't beg for sympathy. He didn't desperately chase relevance. He simply spoke honestly about what life had become. That honesty created something more powerful than nostalgia. It created humanity. For younger viewers discovering him for the first time, Joey Bishop's story becomes more than a Hollywood documentary. It becomes a reflection on time itself. On friendship. On fame. On aging. On how quickly life changes while people are busy living it. And perhaps that's why so many people walked away from his final interviews feeling emotional without fully understanding why. They weren't just watching an old comedian speak. They were watching someone slowly say goodbye to an entire chapter of American culture. In the end, Joey Bishop may not have left the world with explosive confessions or shocking scandals. Instead, he left behind something far more lasting: perspective. His final interviews reminded people that fame fades, crowds disappear, and even the brightest spotlights eventually grow dark. But character, intelligence, and authenticity outlive all of it. Joey Bishop spent decades standing beside some of the most legendary names in entertainment history. He witnessed the rise of old Hollywood, the golden age of Las Vegas, and the unforgettable era of the Rat Pack. Yet perhaps his greatest performance was not on a stage or television screen. Perhaps it was the quiet honesty he showed near the end of his life, the honesty of a man who had nothing left to prove. While many celebrities spend their final years chasing relevance, Joey Bishop seemed to accept time with rare dignity. He understood that life is temporary, that memories become priceless, and that real success is not measured only by headlines or applause. Sometimes, the people who leave the deepest impact are the ones history almost forgets. And maybe that's why his story still touches audiences today. Because beneath the fame, the tuxedos, the casino lights, and the laughter, Joey Bishop's final interviews revealed something deeply human. Even legends grow old, even icons feel lonely, and even the greatest eras eventually come to an end. But the truth they leave behind can continue echoing long after they're gone. Today, younger generations may not fully understand what Joey Bishop represented during Hollywood's golden years. But those who listen closely to his words can still hear the wisdom of a man who saw the entertainment world at its highest peak and its quietest ending. He didn't ask to be remembered as the loudest star in the room. He simply wanted to be real. And in the end, that honesty became unforgettable. The lights of old Hollywood may have faded, but stories like Joey Bishop's ensure that its soul never truly disappears.